Hello and welcome to Global Times Pakistan. I am Heather Hayat Khan, and today I'm joined by Oksana Vaiku, renowned Russian journalist associated with RT. And today we will discuss the ongoing situation between Ukraine and Russia, and of course, the recent conflict between India and Pakistan. Oksana, thank you very much for your time.
It's good to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Oksana, there was a huge drone attack by the Ukrainian side on Russia, and there are reports that Ukraine managed to destroy 40 bombers of the Russian military in this attack. What actually happened? What was the actual loss, and how Ukraine managed to attack so deep inside Russia?
Well, as far as the Russian sources are concerned, we don't know the precise figures yet. The Ministry of Defense hasn't released it. What I heard from the Ukrainian side is that about 40 military planes, including strategic bombers, were damaged. Um, I don't know whether this one is correct or not because Ukrainians are prone to exaggeration, but I do think that it is pretty clear that a substantial damage has been caused, and this attack took Russia absolutely off guard. I think this is something that will go into the military books and will be studied by security analysts all over the world. And we have to recognize it. I mean, my country has been damaged substantially, but the ingenuity of this attack, I think, took everybody by surprise. And from what I've heard from Western sources and Ukrainian sources, it was more than a year and a half in planning, and they managed to get very deep inside Russia. I mean, it's not only the central part of Russia where those airports were attacked, but also the northern and the very far away eastern part of Russia that is not far from Pakistan, actually. The scope, the logistics are very impressive. But I think we also have to be mindful of the fact that the Ukrainian side really likes very attention-grabbing style of news events, and whether or not it changes anything substantially on the battlefield is a big question. Sure, they have caused some damage, but I'm sure Russian troops will continue moving onto the military targets, and I think they will be quite successful. So I'm not sure that it's gonna change anything in practical terms on the battlefield, even though the Ukrainians are clearly celebrating today the publicity victory.
How is basically Russia planning to respond back? And there are reports on social media is that Russia is somehow planning to use the nuclear weapon as well.
Well, I would be very mindful about what you hear on social media, even though, some of my friends in the UK and in Poland are also very much concerned about that. Uh, Having covered the work of Vladimir Putin for more than 20 years, I can tell you that he is not somebody who is going to jump into an action like this, although there will definitely be retaliatory strikes and perhaps a very substantial retribution. But I think that the military commanders in Russia, including the political leadership, will be very careful to make sure that they do not play into the Ukrainian hands or the European hands, because the Europeans are now seen as the major sort of saboteurs of peace. And what Russia ultimately wants is to accomplish its military goals, to ensure its security, and to finish this war, to avoid a larger conflict, because ultimately we do want to focus on our own development. And it is in our interest to make sure that this war is measured appropriately to ensure our interest, but not to, go overboard, and, not to turn it into, Vietnam or Afghanistan. We do not want anything of the sort, because this is something where we would be the biggest losers. And so to answer your question shortly, I think this is being planned, and you should not expect any outcome that will you know be too extreme, because Russia is very mindful of not only you know fighting this campaign, but also making sure that it does not damage what it wants to achieve in the world. And what it wants to achieve in the world is a measured, smart use of hard power in order to achieve practical goals, but not to, lash out at somebody or to prove the point. I think Putin is way beyond that.
So, do you think there are chances of a ceasefire between the two countries?
I think short-term ceasefires, yes, and I think the Russians.
Short-term ceasefire.
Well, a couple of days ago, the Kremlin suggested a day or two of ceasefire to make sure that the commanders have time to pull the bodies of their fallen soldiers off the battlefields, or that, it's essentially, it's not even a humanitarian pause. It's just a pause recognizing that, people need to take care of the fallen. I mean, that's one of the values, spiritual values for us. So, the Russians would put an effort into that. But as far as, something that Ukrainians are demanding or the Europeans are demanding, an unconditional ceasefire, absolutely not. Because, I mean, we do not subscribe by the mantra of a loser takes all. And I think this is what the Ukrainians and the Europeans are trying to ensure. They're trying to get through the peace talks what they have lost on the battlefield, and they're not going to get that. If they come to the negotiating table in good faith, and if they take reality into account, yes, there will be very deliberated, detailed, painstaking discussions. But arm twisting into a ceasefire is not going to work, even though they may have successful attacks like the one that you mentioned in the beginning of the interview.
Okay, and American President Donald Trump is again and again saying that he wants to mediate the things between the two countries. Do you think that his efforts are sincere?
Well, I cannot get into his mind and judge his sincerity. I do
So,
think that he's
what is basically the approach in Russia?
well, I think he is taken as somebody who could contribute to peace. And I'm not sure he can do it directly because his, sort of political style is too impulsive for an affair that we have on hand. It's a very difficult war, very, very long front line, and there are lots and lots of issues that you have to go through painstakingly rather than just posting something on social media. This is not how it's going to work. But the fact that he does want to take the United States out of this conflict gives Russia a chance to explore this opportunity. And ultimately, I think both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and this is a point of convergence, very paradoxical convergence, but convergence nonetheless, they do want to keep this line of communication with the White House open. Now, it's very different because the Ukrainians would like the Americans to go back to the Joe Biden style, where they would, get everything they want from the Americans, no questions asked. It's clear that Trump is not ready to provide that. And the Russians do want to have somebody in the United States, a partner that is not necessarily siding with them, because there are still major issues, differences between Russia and the United States, but at least somebody who can approach geopolitics constructively. And I think that's the most appealing thing in Trump for the Kremlin, that this is the guy who is not lost in his, abstract ideas of how the world is supposed to look like, but rather somebody who can some connection with the reality on the ground, who understands what it takes to spend money, what it takes to achieve results, what it takes to minimize or optimize your opportunities. And this is perhaps a more difficult but also a more realistic partner for Russia. And I think the Russian leadership is trying to make sure that whatever this opportunity offers is being used for a good cause.
Oksana, after the recent Ukrainian attacks, there were some analysts who were of the view that we are moving towards another world war. You are in Russia. Do you think the same?
Well, we would not like to see it happen. And in fact, I mentioned you some of my friends in Poland and the UK who are extremely anxious. And I think the mood in Russia is totally different. I mean, sure, there are attacks and major attacks. The security is being compromised. There's lots of terrorist attacks with drones, and people who cooperate with Ukrainian security agencies and who stage a low-scale terrorist attacks. But having said that, I think the Russians are quite confident that we can manage it on our own. We have the industry, we have the energy resources, we have the population that is more or less focused on not fighting this war to an end, but understanding that this is what we do for our own security. But we are also ready to put an end to that as soon as that's possible. I think the difference with the Europeans is that when you are very far away from an actual reality, you almost construct a psychotic fear around yourself, and it is pretty clear that European leadership are using Russia as a distraction from Europe's own enormous problems, structural economic problems, problems with migration, problems with politics, the political and social discontent that is growing in Europe beyond proportion. And sure, they're using Russia, to try to scare their population so that they would not contest it. But I think the Russians do try to react in a measured, thoughtful way to not again play into the European hands, because we do not want another world war. Although I have to say that in the previous two world wars, the danger to Russia's existential interest, to Russia's survival as a state, always came from Europe. I mean, we have suffered many wars coming from the West, and that's why I guess Russia is reacting to this threat of NATO in a way it's reacting.
Oksana, there was a 4-day conflict a few days back between India and Pakistan, in which Pakistan downed 6 Indian fighter jets, and in response to India's attack on the civilian population of Pakistan and 9 military establishments of Pakistan, Pakistan attacked 26 military establishments of India. How is Russia basically looking into the ongoing situation between India and Pakistan?
Well, I think generally speaking, Russia's stance toward any military conflict outside would be not to take sides. So, as you know, Russia has long historical ties with India. Recently, it has developed a very pragmatic relationship with Pakistan, and China also is a major factor here because China is a major ally and partner both for Pakistan and for Russia. But I think the Russians trying to make sure that they're not in a position where they have to choose. Russia understands that it needs, cooperation of Pakistan for regional security in Afghanistan and Central Asia, and it understands that it needs good relations with India to manage the rivalry between, China and the United States, the difficult relations with the United States. So I think the Russians are very careful to make sure that they are sitting on the fence, but that they are sitting on the fence in the constructive way, that they are not using whatever difficulties exist between neighbors for their own, nefarious purposes.
And lastly, Pakistan destroyed 2 batteries of the Russian air defense system in India in the last conflict, which happened a few days back. There are reports that Russia was requesting for the access, which India denied.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm not familiar with that. You will have to ask somebody of a military background. But commenting on it generally, I think Russia's request would stem from the need to protect the technology. But also, once the equipment is sold, it is sold to a party, although Russia does usually include in the contract that the, sophisticated equipment cannot be transferred to, third parties. But in this particular case, I think the Russians would want to make sure that they ensure, technical safety, and that, whatever is left, the debris, that it's taken care of. But in terms of using that geopolitically, I doubt that the Moscow would do that. In any case, if there are any disagreements between the Russians and the Indians, or the Indians and the Pakistanis, or the Russians and the Pakistanis, I think Moscow's approach to diplomacy, including military diplomacy, is such that they will try to approach it in close talks, to make sure that it's not being manipulated, or it's not being used politically. I think they would want to get to the substance of the issue before they go public and express their displeasure with whatever partner.
Thank you very much, Oksana, for your time. Viewers, this is all from today. Thank you very much.